Hi, thank you for joining me. I'd like to speak on behalf of Pilates Mat today. And I believe strongly after teaching so many various formats that Pilates Mat has actually been the most difficult for me over the years. I've been teaching it for about 4 years now, off and on, consistently for the first couple of years. And realizing the classes that I've been taking and the classes I've been teaching, that it's a hard class to teach because it's difficult to find a pace that works with everybody, and you want to make sure that you're cueing people enough to really feel the exercise in the right places, but also be doing the exercises correctly. So Pilates in general can be difficult in that way. So I want to just briefly talk about some really easy and important tips, the things that I look for as a manager in an audition for Pilates Mat, and the things that I've learned over time as an instructor in Pilates Mat. So the first thing I want to talk about is that planning a Pilates Mat class should actually be one of the easiest classes to plan for, because there's a repertoire already there for you from Joseph Pilates. He's basically given it to us on a platter. And so I feel like Pilates Mat instructors tend to overcomplicate things because we try to make things harder or more creative, and we try to change things up. When really a Pilates exercise, even the easiest Pilates exercise, the most essential Pilates exercise, like a half roll back, I tell my participants all the time that the more advanced you get in Pilates, the harder you can make even the easier exercises in Pilates. So it's not necessarily about how creative you can get as an instructor, it's about using the tools that you have in front of you. So a really important thing that I like to incorporate and I like to see in all of my Pilates classes is a warm-up of some kind. People still need to get their abs and their breath and their body kind of ready to go for exercise, and it also helps people start to get in tune with their body because they've most likely been busy at work and busy throughout their day, or they're about to be busy throughout their day depending on when they take class, that they really aren't spending a lot of time in their body. So for the warm-up, the principles that I focus on, we know that there's various principles in Pilates from head to toe, but the principles I like to focus on every single class, hands down, are the breath, of course, encouraging them to breathe, inhaling through the nose, exhaling through the mouth, and helping them feel what that pursed lips feels like. So they're not creating tension in their upper body, but they're actually breathing fluidly and encouraging the deep abdominals to fire. From breath, I move to abdominals. So depending on whatever warm-up movement you want to do, from that half roll back or just even an ab prep where it's like a prep into 100, practicing the abdominal connection, and then I like to bring in the hip placement as well. And these things need to be talked about quickly, and you don't want them on their back for too long in that warm-up. So there you go, you have a first 5 to 10 minute piece of your class that should be in there every single time. And it doesn't hurt to have a theme of the day sometimes too. I encourage instructors to think about that. Like I said, we have so many Pilates principles. We want to think about the neck and the chin. Maybe that's our overarching kind of theme for the day. We talk a lot about that. Maybe we talk more about the lumbar spine. Maybe talk more about the quads. Maybe we talk more about the glutes, because we're going to be working all of those muscle groups in some way, shape, or form throughout the class. So why not make it a theme? And then from our warm-up, I also like to make sure that instructors have a flow. So whether they're following the repertoire completely or they move different pieces around, there needs to be a flow. So the thing about mat is you want to move the spine in all ranges of motion, but you want to be careful not to go from half roll back. Then we're going to do this one, and then we're going to do breaststroke, and then we're going to do and then we're going to do side. So you want to stay in one position for a long period of time, or it starts to become chaos and it starts to waste time in the transitions. People are going to feel more and get a better workout if they're doing something for a longer period of time. However, be careful in Pilates Mat that you as the instructor, we have an endurance rate bigger than our classes when we're teaching. And so keeping them in this position and this position, we may do the stomach series, but you don't want to be doing 100 reps of every single one. And that's where I start to see instructors have a hard time, is they're too busy cueing them through the exercise, making sure everything's perfect, that their legs have been in tabletop or stretched in front of them for 15 minutes, which is really hard. So just take that in mind as you're teaching. And sometimes I really like to see instructors move around the room when they teach Pilates. Sometimes we aren't even doing it ourselves, so we have a hard time identifying just how tired our students are. So from the flow, like I said earlier, making sure the spine moves in all ranges of motion, but with a creative way of sequencing so that you're not flipping all over the place the whole time. From all range of motion, I forgot to mention in the warm-up portion there should always be the 100, some form of the 100. The 100 is in every repertoire for a reason. It's on the reformer, it's on the Cadillac, it's on the chair. There's some form of the 100, or that breathing with that kind of pulsing feeling that people need to feel. So whether they're just holding their arms down by their sides and they're breathing and they're focusing on their breath while their legs are in tabletop or their legs on the ground, some form of controlling the breath, really warming up the center and encouraging them to feel those abdominals. So I feel like the 100 is kind of hands down one of those exercises that should be in every class. And if people have, some people I think have kind of a fear of the 100, or this theme that I see in classes, or instructors have ruined the 100 for some people. What I think is this really crazy hard exercise, when really it should be comfortable over time. We need to find the level that they need to be at, and they need to learn to enjoy the exercise. So as the instructor, however you approach an exercise, that's how your students are going to feel about it. It's just such an important exercise, and it's meant to be in the repertoire. So the 100, making sure that's in there. And then to make your class easy to plan and easy to be successful at, try to limit the props. I know we have the small ball, we have the bands, some people use yoga straps in their classes. The fitness circle is a great tool, but I love to do themes in my class. So maybe you use one piece of equipment. Maybe you always have a band. I do encourage my students to have a band pretty much next to them the whole time, in case during the roll-up, it's not quite a roll-up day that day, and they're having trouble doing that. It's a nice tool to have in case of emergency in the class. But I really encourage to use less equipment, because then it turns into kind of, like I gave the example of the flipping all over the place, it turns into grab this, turn around, get this, and then it's just wasting time. And then the final thing that I've noticed in a lot of classes that I need maybe help understanding is the use of pulses. And what I want instructors to hopefully understand is, why do we incorporate pulsing in our classes? And it's kind of become, of course, this trend in bar classes as well, where we start to shorten the range of motion and we pick things up. But I really recommend to be careful with pulses, because what I see in classes is students start to pulse. Maybe it's during the saw, they're doing the pulses, and they start to twist, and they think they're trying to use momentum to get to a certain place. As an instructor, you have to be careful to help them understand that pulses are meant to help you feel the movement a little bit more. And it's like a release and contract, and it's small. Pulses are designed to be much smaller than a full range of motion exercise. So that's another reason why I encourage instructors to be careful with using pulses. They can be a useful tool, but when overused, you're basically pulling someone out of being able to move in that full range of motion, and you're making them isolate into a smaller range of motion. So it can encourage tightness, or just over clenching, or over activating a muscle where other muscles are starting to quiet down because you're pulsing so much. So we want our participants to feel amazing after Pilates Mat class. We want them to feel longer and taller and happy and ready to take on life. So we want to make sure that we're making them feel good. And pulses can help you isolate the muscle and really feel that, but just being careful of that. So just to recap what I had talked about in Pilates Mat, these are my essential tools to give you in Pilates Mat. I'm sure there's so many more, but warming up with the principles, and at least always incorporating some form of breath, abdominal connection, feeling their transversus, and understanding what that is. Hips, hip placement, and where their hips should be for certain exercises. Using creativity, I don't know if I said this, using creativity in your cues rather than the exercises. We as instructors try to get so excited on new exercises, new variations, when really if we could just refine our cues, we could make an exercise that is essentially easy, much harder and more challenging for our participants and more beneficial. There needs to be a flow in a Pilates Mat class, so there needs to be certain exercises that work together in one place and they kind of section out so that people aren't flopping all over the place on the mat. All ranges of motion on the spine. This means flexion, extension, side bending, and twisting, and sometimes even a side bend twist when we have that the elbows to knees exercise, or a single thigh stretch, some of those movements. Always incorporating the 100 in our Pilates Mat classes, and limiting props, and thinking critically about how many pulses we are bringing into our Pilates practice. I hope this helps all of our Pilates Mat instructors, and it is a really difficult class to teach. Take classes, be a student in Pilates Mat, and I also recommend that will really help you understand a good pace and a good way to be successful.